thank you all for coming to the reinstated BSA conversations. For those of you who don't know, this has been an ongoing program at the BSA for quite a while, including early iterations that were black tie, but we didn't hold everyone to that here today. The idea here is that this will be the first of hopefully many conversations where our projects are presented by our peers. The goal here is that they're all projects that are on the boards in process. So, we'll present them, and then we want folks to share critique, feedback, thoughts, ideas, and the goal is that it has the opportunity to influence the outcome of the project here. So they can be quite lively, and as with all good experiments, we're using ourselves as our first test subjects. So Andrew Brookes and Rand Allison from our office at designLAB here are going to present our first project, but we hope to do this every month. Next month we have Elizabeth Cristoforetti of Supernormal lined up to present something. Beyond that, we don't have anything official yet. So if you are interested or have someone you would like to recommend, reach out to me, let me know, and we'll get them lined up. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Andrew and Rand. I don't know, any questions, thoughts, comments before we get started? All right, the show is yours, guys.
Thank you, Sam.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, like Sam said, I'm Andrew Brookes. I'm a director at designLAB, the project manager for this project that we're going to be talking about today, the Revere Community Boathouse on FAIA Ave. This is Rand Allison. He's kind of been doing the heavy work on this project. We've worked together on a couple other projects as well. So briefly, this is a pretty small project, but it is very important to the city of Revere, and it's also part of a much larger and very ambitious project that the city has, and we'll go over all of that. So this is a existing structure, barely, and there's a lot to talk about of kind of what's existing and what's there to be removed. It's an existing brick building. I think it's been nobody's been in the building in I think 20 years maybe. So it's really used for storage right now. There's some parked cars in there. Vandalism. Yeah, it's a good place to spray paint if you want to. There's the original building, which is the gabled building, and then there was a CMU addition put on the side, which is this middle building. There's heavy deterioration everywhere. Basically anywhere you look, there's something's deteriorating inside or outside. This is the insides. It's currently storing some sort of oil truck or something. There is a lot of nice detail in the building. There's a lot of kind of artifacts from the original character and the original program of the building, which was a boathouse. They used it to repair boats. There's rails in the floor that used to go into the water that you could bring boats out into the building for. There are these huge sliding doors that are incredibly heavy, and the rails are very much rusted over, so you can't actually move the doors very well. But there's all this nice detail in there that it doesn't actually exist in too many places except a well deteriorated building. But it's all holding itself up. The brick isn't structural. It has a nice delicate structural series of members to it. Just some more pictures of the interior of those large doors, of the brick exterior. It is, I don't know if anyone knows kind of the boundary of Revere. It has a pretty unique layout. It's kind of self-gerrymandered. Then the boathouse sits right on the top of the wing that sits between the ocean, the bay, and the Pines River. And across the Pines River is the Rumney Marsh, which actually has a deep history and is very large and is quite beautiful. There is a very large, I think, a recycling plant or trash plant right in the middle, unfortunately. But the views from the marsh, from the boathouse, are quite nice. And then, of course, Revere also has the first public beach in the country, which is very close to the boathouse site. So there is a deep history to this site and to the city of Revere that is kind of slowly been lost or taken over by either climate change or industry or highway. So this is our site. Boathouse is here, a big white building. There is was a boat yard next to it. It's currently storing lobster traps, which are amazingly part of the project. That was something we have to deal with. And then there's a kind of soft residential neighborhood next door on the right here. There's the North Shore Roads, which is kind of overwhelming and separates the neighborhoods, and it's quite hard to access the neighborhoods, the boathouse, and this larger site, which is the riverfront development, which is the much larger project that this community building is just a small part of. So our scope of work is actually just the footprint of the building and of the addition, but we have to consider the wants of the rest of the site and the requirements of the rest of the project, because it is very ambitious and it's a big part of I think, of the future of the city of Revere. So this is the view from the other side. You can see our building here in the middle and the Pines River. And of course, the Rumney Marsh is kind of overwhelming the rest of the views there. So this is Gibson Park. There is technically program there, but the site has kind of been overwhelmed by actually climate change. It floods all the time. There is a picture somewhere out there, I can't find it right now, of our building completely flooded underwater, 2 feet of water inside the building. And these photos are actually from this morning. So this is the addition here. This is a bit below high tide. I think these were taken at 10:30. High tide was at 11 o'clock. The whole rest of the neighborhood was also underwater twice this week. So it's a huge problem. It could ultimately take over the rest of the city, or at least this neighborhood of the city. And of course, this building is already has been taken over by this effect. And so the city has much larger plans to kind of solve that flooding problem with revetments and solutions. So this is the plan for the rest of the project. We were not involved with this planning, but it is very ambitious and is also just kind of wonderful. Like it's they took on this amazingly large project to kind of save this neighborhood from flooding, as well as provide extremely needed community amenities. Kind of normal park stuff, large fields, tennis courts, parking, access to this site, everything else, and as well as new residential development. But the hardest part about this is building the vegetated berm up here, which comes right to the edge of our building, and that is to protect the rest of the neighborhoods. It's an amazing permitting process that they're going through that I just am somewhat happy to not be involved with. But our project is this small white building here, with that is connected to these raised platforms and a dock that is for rowing boats and kayaks and potentially sailboats as well. And that is the program of the building. It is a community building that is mostly a boathouse, but can be flexible enough to have a event like this inside the building. So you can move the ergs, move the boats around to then have a presentation within that building. But we always look at the site, of course, before starting the design. So we have this kind of low laying site, of course, with the flooding, low density residential nearby, existing park on the other side, but none of it's really activated. It's all cut by the state highway, which is makes it very difficult to access. So the city is working on, of course, first a large development on the far side, which if you've driven up this road, you have 100% seen. If you've gone to Nahant Beach, you can see it from there. And and that connectivity is hard, and bringing all those people will be difficult. So they're going to improve the connectivity. And that will provide our project with significantly more access, more pedestrian traffic, so on, so forth. There'll be new program on the park, new accessible program, much needed program. Of course, there was a large community process involved with this, so requests were made, requests were followed, and then also the revetment wall, the vegetated berm, which was not a request, it was needed, and it was actually pushed back against by the town, but it's much needed to kind of save that neighborhood. And then you can start to see how our building sits right in the middle of these improvements, and it almost starts to act as a gateway. Gateway to the water, gateway to the parks, a gateway to even the residential neighborhood. And then everything starts to be connected, but disconnected from the highway. And so it's starting to bring everything together, and we start to see this community room boathouse as this gateway, or this opening into the park, or from the park to the rest of the neighborhood. And that's how we started to view this project. So it's just an interesting juxtaposition between the new and the old, just like any project, but it's exciting to see. But then we put the designLAB layer on top of that, and how we view most of our projects. We work on a lot of historic projects, or a lot of old projects. Historic and old may be different, and so where do they fall on that timeline? And that's that disposition, and then also where do they fall within the environment of constructed or organic? And we've classified those 4 quadrants into historic, modern, natural, and utilitarian. And nearly all of our projects fit into this. And I like to think that it's not post-rationalized. And this project is very clearly in the utilitarian corner of this, where it wasn't built for architecture, it was built for a need. And so there's a lot of utilitarian qualities to the building, but there's not a lot of architectural necessity currently. So now that's kind of the overall view of a bit of how designLAB looks at it, a bit of the site. Rand's going to walk you through the massing and the design a bit.
Yeah, so speaking towards the utilitarian aspects of the building, a lot of the solutions that we came up with were very utilitarian and pragmatic. So here you can see we already spoke about how the CMU addition that exists currently, that's going to be demolished, and we're going to put a new volume that's roughly the same square footage, but is actually a little bit skinnier but longer. And the reason for that massing is because we need a space to fit the longest of the crew boats, which I think is like 60 something feet long, so pretty long. And so that was like the main driver behind the addition. And yeah, we'll get to why the addition. Here you can kind of see, you guys saw the photos. Brooke said barely an existing structure. All of the masonry was basically unsavable. We went through a series of iterations trying to see how we could save the brick and whether that was really worth it for us. And in the end, we sort of came to this compromise where we wanted to keep the stuff that was in good condition, and since the masonry brick wasn't structural, that sort of gave us this opportunity to save what's actually integral to the building, which is the steel structure and the interior brick wall. So we get to actually save some of like the utilitarian aspects, the very like core of the building we actually got to save.
And we started to consider those as like artifacts almost inside the building. There's like hooks and rails and stuff that you can ultimately see the story of.
Yeah, so here's some photos of just the interior, and you can kind of start to see like some of those artifacts of like very nice steel trusses, very nice roof decking, very nice HVAC system, very technologically advanced, state of the art. Yeah, some obviously the lighting and pretty much everything comes out except for what we thought was integral to the character of the building. Yeah, and then you can see our dotted line here where we actually had to raise the slab elevation by 5.5 feet due to the flooding. Yeah, so here you can see some other elements. Start to see some of these artifacts. There's all sorts of like hoisting mechanisms and pulley systems and stuff. And so a big part of our design process was trying to keep everything that we could. Obviously the plywood walled bathroom had to go. We fought to save it, but yeah, so now that after we kind of figured out what was savable and what was not, we started to look at how are we going to program this space, and how are we going to fit the things that we need in the building. And so we came up with this compact volume of basically all of the support spaces for the community space and the boat storage. And so we sort of just fit them here. We initially went through a couple of iterations trying to work around some of the big door openings and stuff, but once we realized that the exterior walls were basically shot, we kind of got a break in that regard. Like, we're able to manipulate the interior space a little bit more. And so you can see how that works out in plan. All of our support spaces tucked away nicely in the corner. Yeah, and so then after we sort of programmed the interior volumes, we started thinking about what's the character of the exterior of the building. And so we came up with like a matrix of like different options, because we got feedback from the client that was basically like, we don't want this to be industrial, so to speak. And we're calling it utilitarian, but I think there is a distinction between those two. And so, yeah, it was something that we had to go through internally and sort of figure out, like, where do we draw the line between like industrial and utilitarian, especially working with some of the industrial steel and masonry and materials like that. So we started looking at some precedents in buildings that are of a similar character to ours, how we can sort of work in different materials with what's existing. See a lot of wood, a lot of translucent materials, painted steel. You start to get into brick. And this is a material that we really caught our eyes, like the translucent panels. Sorry. And then we presented that to the client, and the feedback we basically got was like, yeah, we love it. It looks great, but this isn't a residential neighborhood. Like, we need to really think about how the neighbors are gonna react to that. And again, like, trying not to be so industrial with the material selection. So we started looking at some board and batten precedents, and we thought that that fits in really nicely. That's kind of right on the line between like utilitarian, residential. And so then we looked back at a project of designLAB's actually, that sort of uses both of those materials quite well, I think. So we drew a lot of inspiration from that. And so then, yeah, we came up with this basically, which is like thinking about the Thayer Ave side, which is obviously the side that faces the residential area. We thought that should have its own distinct character. The what's called the parking lot side here, basically the end caps of the volume, we thought that should have its own distinct character. And then the Gibson Park side, the elevation that faces the park, we thought that should also have its own distinct character. And so we came up with sort of a matrix of transparency. We got some materials that we thought would work well within this matrix. And then we laid out the two volumes with different configurations that we thought would suit the building best. And so for the community portion, we came up with something that we called historic, which is basically leaving the Thayer Ave elevation almost as is, but obviously giving it a new skin, but sort of leaving the character similar to what exists currently. And then the transparent ends, you can see by the blue, those are like the caps we were talking about. Like, how do we treat those? Do we want them to be transparent? And then a clear story, obviously. And then we paired that with what's the character of the boat storage edition. So we thought about like, do we want that to be more opaque? Do we want it to be translucent? And then we came up with an idea that we thought was pretty novel, which is like, could we potentially screen some of the mechanical units and some of the potentially nastier things from the park space, so that you're not like inundated with HVAC units while you're playing soccer, walking your dog, or whatever. And so we showed them to the client, and the client was very straightforward with their critique. They said they wanted a combination of both of these two options. So we ran with that, and yeah, we ended up with having this screen that I just spoke about. We really liked the translucent end caps. We thought that provides a good outward facing elevation, but then also creates a lot of really nice interior light qualities. And then, yeah, using the board and batten to face the residential neighborhood, we thought that was a good strategy, and the client really liked that. Yeah, and then you can see this is the park side, right? So you start to see how that screen works, sort of hiding some of the uglier elements, I suppose, the HVAC units, and these two large doors that face outward to the water and give people the views that Brookes was speaking about earlier.
So with these two, there's really two like foundational facade parts. There's the residential side, and then there's the park side, and those start to come together, obviously, with that chosen massing and that chosen composition, and they start to act like a handshake a bit, where it wraps to the front, and the residential side wraps up to the front or to the top. And so we started to explore that a little bit with facades, but we also during a community meeting, we got a very strong not compliment, the opposite of compliment.
They call that feedback, right?
Feedback, yeah. Comments from the resident who lives at 225 Mills Ave about how our very large historic windows, or what we call historic windows, we're recreating those windows in the same place that they were, would look directly onto this person's house as they do right now. And it was of course like, yeah, that's very concerning. It's a community room. There's gonna be a lot of people there every once in a while. And we should consider that very seriously. But we should also consider the architectural aspect of what that means, what that comment means in our response to it. And it's also kind of architecture 101 is shading and apertures and directing views. And it's a perfect example of how we can direct the views away from the residents straight to the water. We're able to do that with the angles we have. And so we actually took a step back, and we still took the opaque, translucent, and transparent spectrum that Rand just walked through. But we started to actually dive into what the opaque could be and potentially how it starts to be more perforated maybe than just opaque with these windows in particular. So this is kind of where we landed at with that board and batten and just those exposed windows. And they are very open. They're with the raised slab. The slab goes up exactly to the sills, just coincidentally, which was perfect. But it's floor to ceiling. It's taller than a person, so somebody could look right out at 225 mils. So we started to look at pretty standard ways of slatting the windows and cutting that view down significantly, and just rhythms and depths, which in all honesty, they all look great. We were happy with almost all of them, but then starting to guide those views actually away from the residents and towards the water, which became successful really quick. And just kind of the rhythm of that. But then taking it a step farther is how does it become symbolic of what's actually acting inside the building and how the building's operating. It's a perfect opportunity to do that. So these are kind of silly equations that we put together. We had some more as well that were even more representative. But the idea of an or took off because it's quite similar to actually like a wood slat or a shingle. And this is actually an idea that we explored in another idea of cutting a shingle into a shape, or another idea we explored another project. And so we were looking at boat construction and the shape of these blades, which Sam knows a lot about as a rower. It was really interesting to explore all of this, and actually our details, which Brad helped us with. So thank you, Brad. Actually look surprisingly similar to the section of a crew boat for this solution. But so we started to get really representative about it, and a little too representative, but how that could start to act and operate, and the kind of aesthetic qualities that may cause. And it was all really interesting, and we ultimately landed on something that's quite a bit more abstract, but from a certain angle, it still represents kind of that aura character. It does obviously somewhat reminiscent of like fish gills, but the way it's built and the way it guides the views is like exactly what we wanted, and it fits in with the board and batten rhythm really well. So this is kind of where we landed with the shades of the windows, and you can see from the we'll show you interior view and how it guides those. But again, just showing our floor plan and those windows here, how the community space looks directly out onto that, but from the right angle, it looks directly out onto the water and actually extends the view of the water side glass. Other than that, we have kind of subtle colors and subtle materials. The only real material with texture is wood millwork, which they use for storage, multifunctional storage, and movable ergs, which are the rowing machines that everybody loves. And so this is the view of the what we've been calling the volume on the interior that's just inserted and only delicately touches the existing steel, so it doesn't like ride off of that much. And then from the other side, you can start to see how it guides the view away from the residence and towards the water, and extends it into that large bifold glass door. Just a couple of views from the exterior. So you can see it's raised up 5 feet. It's all on pillars. We have to leave that all open to allow the water to come through. That's a MIPA required for the permit, which is quite difficult. And we're very thankful for some of the engineers here. And then everything's incredibly accessible, of course, as a community building. There's large ramps coming from all directions, as the whole park is almost raised up, and there's large decks that are raised up as well, outside of our scope of work. And then from that deck side, it starts to squat down a little bit because we're up 5 feet in the deck. But it's all kind of also designed around like the ability to move a 57-foot boat with 8 people carrying it. So kind of like how the whole world is designed around being able to ship something in a truck. This is designed around being able to move a 57-foot boat. So, yeah. And that's all we have.
Thanks, guys. Can I ask a question? Yeah. Easy one. Nice presentation. I'm curious, as a community boat facility, what all are you storing? Just rowing, competitive rowing shells or kayaks, or I know ocean going rowing boats are now very popular. Any kind of small sail boats? What's the requirements for boat storage?
So in the boat storage room, we're accounting for, it is all based off of the 57 to 60-foot 8-person skull. Shell. But then we can store all the way down to a 1-person skull.
So officially, the city is leasing the operations out to an operator. And so the likely operator is a rowing program, it's a community rowing program, but it's set up so that if they change their mind, they could do it to a kayak program or any other sort of boat. And I think they have plans to rent kayaks and other sorts of boats that wouldn't be stored in the boat storage bay, because those are a little more smaller and weather resilient. So they sort of are really trying to keep it ambiguous in terms of exactly what kind of watercraft can go in there. But it's designed around, rowing racing shells because that's the most likely tenant and the most challenging storage requirement.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking the beauty of it's fantastic that you're saving what most people would tear down as a beautiful industrial structure, but the whole armature scaffolding of the boat storage as a flexible unit could almost be the modern analog to a lightweight metal shed, and could be a really beautiful, interior entity in and of itself with some view through its translucency. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the boat storage facility, we haven't talked about that much. It's an unconditioned space with a dry sprinkler system, with just a really, really simple structural grid that's based off of the existing structural grids. These buildings, they're not supporting each other, I believe. So there is an expansion between them, but it's really straightforward. And one of the goals we had was actually to be able to see, and what spawned a little bit of the translucency conversation, was being able to see the structure from the exterior as a bit of a shadow. And so we have some cross bracing in there so that you can see a bit of a discussion between the structure and the facade. But,
Curious if you're working with a landscape architect, or are you really responsible just for the building and the deck out to the water?
so we're actually not being responsible for the deck. But we do work, there is a landscape architect on the much larger project that we work really closely with. So we've been, they comment on our designs, we comment on theirs weekly. And so that's been the process, but it's not as much as of a direct conversation as a typical contract would be.
I'm just noticing, I feel like the access to the building feels very awkward and kind of,
We agree.
and then, yeah. So,
Yeah, we've tried to influence that, but it is outside of our scope. Like all the ramps, all the stairs, all of that is under a separate contract, which, as Brooke said, we sort of have weekly meetings with, but it's a separate contract as part of the whole park redesign.
yeah, it would be nice if it even started to partake of your, your post system to hold those up. And you know all this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See your faces. Then the only other comment I would have is just because being both a woman and having seen a couple of new projects where there are only unisex toilets, I'm curious that you've got such a prominent gendered toilet system. And I'm wondering if you looked at a unisex system instead.
Well, we pushed, I pushed personally quite hard for a unisex system, but the town really wanted separated restrooms. Another really important part about this project is the restrooms are for the whole park.
I was wondering, are there
so
any other restrooms?
That's why we actually have exterior doors to the restrooms as well, so both sides are accessible from the restrooms, and that was just it was a very clear request from the client to have those separated. Yeah, and it sounded like that's just their standard as well.
Blame the plumbing code. This is not.
Yeah.
I know, but I've seen, I think about the Huntington Theater.
It's an
renovation.
exception that will not be reproduced, we're told.
Yeah, really? Really?
For the
The
BSA could lobby the plumbing.
the new plumbing code that just came out 2 weeks ago, maybe 1 week ago, is quite a bit more lenient with it, so.
As someone who has spent a lot of time standing in lines.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Thinking about material selection and not going too far into the HPD, EPD side of it, but thinking about climate, intense sun, freeze thaw, the humidity, and growing up not too far from there. So my sister had a house not far from here. And really hard selecting the right materials to attach to an existing Cape Cod style house. So I was wondering what type of selection of materials, like what you go through for that.
We have a pretty standard wall assembly on the opaque wall, with, how much insulation is on there?
6 or 7 inches, yeah.
Yeah, pretty significant amount of insulation for the new codes as well. And it's just a resilient exterior material, because towns, need lower maintenance buildings that can last a long time. So that was our main kind of outlook is to how to give them a low maintenance facades that will last a while and will withstand the weathering of being so close to the salt water.
We have the advantage that it is a completely new skin, so we're not attaching to any existing elements, at least that'll be exposed.
Right.
So we have, it's a fully new skin, as Brooke said, we got a completely new backup, and then all the materials on the outside are.
So millwork and interior stuff, are you working on that separately, or is that part of your design?
That's part of our design as well. And that will all be considered. We're just jumping into CDs next week on this, when we start, and then we'll actually start to consider, where does a foot fall in that foot that's covered in salt or sand or something. So, and then the flooring is all quite resilient, and it has a bit of a bounce to it as well.
I'm really excited about the space though. It's that whole area of Point of Pines needs something to bring it back to life. This is exciting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I'm not familiar with both houses and storage, but the ones that I'm familiar with, there is an access to the water. Does this have an access to the water on the left-hand side?
It does. It's not entirely part of our scope. Sorry, we have to go back a bit here. But there is a large floating dock that is designed to be able to put the boat down and sit in it. And it's all designed so that you can actually walk. You can come and park your trailer with your 60-foot boat on it, walk it through the building, and then through the walkway down the ramp into the dock, and you can all make those motions easily with minimal people as well.
Well, and my other question was about foundation and footing in this area, and also connection to existing structure in terms of building movement. And there is a big expansion joint happening between the two. How did you deal with that?
Well, we actually, we do, we connect to existing structures in a lot of our projects. So to me, it seems quite normal to do that. So there is an expansion joint. But it's nothing significant to be concerned about. There is some reinforcing that we have to do for the existing columns that are supporting the trusses. But that's all just because of wear and tear. The piles and supporting the slab is very complicated. And it's even more complicated because the site is incredibly high. And you can't like really kick dirt around without getting a permit. So it's all going to be helical piles most likely. But we actually haven't been able to do our test pits because the site is so dirty that it requires a lot of hazmat and cleanup. So we're still working on the structural system a bit below grade.
Great question. I appreciate you asking that. Following on that, so you're raising the slab, what will that lead for your height in that space?
It's still pretty tall. I think even at the eave, it's on the interior is something like 11 or 12 feet.
Okay.
It's just quite a tall space.
And the slabs will be at the same elevation for both portions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask what set that? Like what set the 5 foot? Was that us or was that given?
100-year flood?
It's the 100-year, it's the 2070 100-year flood. So it's quite a bit in the future and a quite extreme situation in the future. Again, kind of going back to the materials is like a resilient building that the city doesn't really have to take care of.
And they're still asking for resilient materials on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate all your studies on the residential side with the windows and everything. Did you have a chance to take a look at the other side of the and is that on the, what I'm assuming could be the east side, the park side of it? Is there anything happening on that transparent, semi-transparent zone?
I think the fun thing about that facade, we studied like what sort of light qualities we wanted to have. And what we realized is that if we did a translucent screen, it actually creates like a very nice shadow with the stacking of the boats. So from the park side, you actually see like you're seeing a silhouette of boat stack.
So you don't need to do anything with the building because the stuffing of
The stuff does it, right?
Yeah, we didn't include any pictures, but we went and visited a number of boathouses, and when you sort of stand in those boat bays, boats stacked and the racks to support them, as Bob was talking about, it has a lot of sort of character of its own, not so dissimilar from the old trusses that are in the existing building. So it's sort of an interesting, comparison and counterpoint to sort of see both of those things through these translucent facades.
And I like the handshake notion of, the solid versus, one thing that will be, going back to technical problems, like, a transparent or translucent plane that then passes through a roof, you have a very different quality on the top and the bottom, and I'm wondering how you were thinking about that, did you try to mitigate that difference between top and bottom, or just fine? That,
It is pretty complicated detail that we're still working through, honestly.
You said CDs start next week.
Yeah.
Later tonight.
some of the cross bracing that you can to merge off above the roof, and you have to brace at some point by direction to go. You could get a lot from the translucency, not only those but other things as well.
Yeah, and it might be a moment of addition, or it could be a lighting design solution on both the bottom and the top, whether we really want to express the boats all together, or the steel, or a mishmash of both of those, like Rand said, and whether we could bring that up into some sort of lighting design above, or even a shadow above that is expressive in some way. So it's still a design opportunity. It is difficult to have that joint, that slab hit wall, and with water and a kind of unique material that runs past it, but we're excited about that detail. We talked about that one specifically, probably more than any other detail in this project. Any other questions?
Well, full disclosure, I'm a former client, so I'm a fan.
But a good one.
I came. I really appreciate your process. I mean, I think your firm looks at the whole site, and, no matter what your scope is under contract, I love how you get the whole site and what might happen in the future, and then what you're doing will fit into that. The engagement with the community, I think there's some very clever design work on those large windows to give the architectural result you're looking for and keep the community happy. So it looks like a great project. I have the same kind of technical question. I'm trying to understand. I understand you're raising the slab, the existing building. So presumably the new building will be at a higher elevation, and you're raising the slab on the existing building. How does that? Is that just become a working surface, or is it really the structure of the whole? How do you rework the existing building with a slab higher? By asking two particular questions.
No, I mean, that's what we have to do. So it's amazingly not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay.
You encase the existing steel. They have their existing footings
That remains.
already go down. That remains for the columns.
Yep.
The brick wall has, I believe it has a spread footing. That does not need to remain, and since we have to have water, but we federally have to have water run through the building underneath, we cannot stop that or obstruct it. And so we have to have piles that come all the way up to our new slab at 5 feet. So those do not change as they hit grade. They just go all the way down. And then they support a suspended slab. And then we insulate the slab.
And the existing slab stays or goes? Or?
Either way, it's going. I believe it's going in our case, but you can do it either way. It's easier. I mean, if you're cutting cores, might as well cut the whole slab away.
But then the foundation walls, do they have to have baffles or water gates to allow the water to pass in and out? Crawl space.
There are no foundation walls.
No foundation walls. So where our facade is resting on our
It's
slab.
the street view from there.
The render.
Yeah, either this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see this, these are the existing column locations, and then these are the slabs, the supporting the new slab.
Can you get down to grade? Like, can the public walk under the building?
So that's a fun topic.
No, not only canvas.
Yeah. So we're gonna store lobster traps underneath the building,
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
which will then act as part of the facades,
Like
for,
actually functionally,
yeah.
that's cool.
Some would say utilitarian.
Might say that.
This
Not
is one of those,
industrial.
like, you know, of course thing, but
Haven't made the renderings yet?
some,
I mean, you
That's
know.
a render of
Are you-
lobster trap.
Yeah.
some
Wasn't that
guy
on your
been
plate?
storing his lobster traps on this site for generations.
Yeah.
Even though it's a town-owned site, he's been doing it and it's sort of been happening. And as part of the negotiations with the community, they agreed that the new design would accommodate the continued storage of his lobster traps.
Yeah,
So he's just.
that's
stuffing
like
them under the
actually a
building.
benefit if you can prevent people from
Yeah.
going underneath.
And so the one kind of hard part about this is we are keeping the existing brick wall in between the old addition and the new addition and the existing building as kind of a existing texture, and it's actually in really good shape because it has been protected this whole time. And you can see it in this rendering. It does come all the way down. That is, of course, not structurally great because it will not receive wave action, but it will get hit with water, and we need to allow the water to run through. So we do need to cut holes within that brick wall. But that's it.
With the city's resiliency plan, are they creating new saltwater marsh beyond the building where there was probably a bulkhead previously?
Another really
It's kind of wild.
pointed question.
Yeah, I mean, we don't totally know all of it, but we've been sort of listening to a lot of it, and they've got, you know, the overall site, yeah.
That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
But you know
Is this
all
chapter
about
91?
this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually not entirely clear about what the plan for this is.
That looked
But-
like the intention, just.
Amazing. So the shape of this deck is shaped like this because it doesn't look like this in this image and it doesn't look like this on site, but I believe it's MIPA considers this small corner a saltwater marsh. And with the saltwater marsh always comes a 100-foot buffer. And so we're able to get, I think they were able to negotiate a bit of relief on that buffer, but that shape is forced by that really, really small, so like you could park a truck on the saltwater marsh and cover it completely.
But I mean, what they're doing, folks, is kind of amazing. They're basically building a new seawall
Yeah,
that wraps this entire thing. But it's like, you know, it's covered in vegetation here.
it's a vegetated berm.
Yeah, it's part of the deck structure here. It's a vegetated berm here. It's a saltwater marsh here, but they're basically either raising up. They're raising up everything in here and they're creating a wall here because all of this whole street, all of these houses are below the flood line.
Yeah.
And so they're raising everything new up and creating a wall around everything that's existing and creating giant chambers under the field to capture basically to keep stormwater out and all of the rainwater runs into these
As a
capture tanks.
sponge guard.
Yeah, until the sea level recedes and then it gets pumped out.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably ambitious project for a town or a city like this.
That in my basement.
Yeah.
Well,
Just a quick question, if you don't
Yeah, you
understand, what's the estimated completion of this project? Like, not just yours, but
I,
park, everything.
it's a great question. I don't
4 years.
think anybody can answer.
Yeah, that's-
I
could lie.
They know.
The first, there's a lot of phases. You can even see some listed here. So we're actually not entirely clear on, and the city's not entirely clear on when this building fits into the phasing of the rest of the project. But the first thing they have to do is they have to clean all of this. They have to remove all the soil, clean it all, which is an enormous effort and extremely costly. But then they should be able to really hit the ground running, and that's kind of the plan with all of this in place. So
It would be really interesting, I mean, obviously the educational opportunity to have during the project when the tanks are going in, when the building's going up, when the wall's being put in, to have, I don't know if the BSA can organize or one of the local universities would be great to get some busloads of students out there just to really understand, and architects. and scientists to really understand how this is happening,
Yeah, that'd be super fun.
right?
So they're actually removing the dirty soil, they're not just capping it.
No, they can't. Yeah. Yeah. And it's some, like, on other projects, I've said, like, Naivety is a great tool, and here it's an amazing tool, because I think when the town kicked this off, they had no idea how difficult that would be, and they just kept running forward with it. So I personally have been very impressed with the city of Revere, and how ambitious they are with this project. And it's fun to be a part of as well.
I second that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And Andrew for being our guinea pigs.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, we're gonna try to make this a regular event, and get a lot of different projects, different firms, different people to present their work. We hope to have a really nice wide range of typologies and projects and everything, so. As I said, let myself or Leah know if there are folks